Andrew Collins flew to the Philippines with a clear plan. A house in the province, a quiet life, a local girlfriend, cheap food, sunsets over rice fields. He'd seen it on YouTube hundreds of times. Men his age who'd walked away from everything: the office, the mortgage, the gray Monday mornings, and found something real on the other side of the world. 8 months later, he was sitting in Manila's airport. Down 26 pounds, chronic stomach problems, a nervous twitch under his left eye that had never been there before. The girl was fine. The province destroyed him. What happens when the dream meets the reality of Philippine rural life, and why none of those YouTube channels show you the real picture? You'll understand by the end of this story. Stay until the final chapter. There's something there that could save you, and not just your money. Andrew Collins was 49 years old. British guy from Birmingham, mid-level manager at a logistics company. 22 years at the same desk, in the same office, with the same people. He wasn't an unhappy man. That's important to understand. He was just stopped. Like a clock that keeps perfect time, but isn't going anywhere. Divorced 10 years, no kids, a small apartment in Solihull. Weekends were soccer on TV, the pub with mates, Sunday trip to the supermarket. Stable, predictable, completely empty. At 50, he took a vacation and went to Thailand, his first time in Asia. He came back a different person, not in some enlightenment sense, just that for the first time in years, he felt alive. The smell of street food, warmth in November, people smiling not because they had to, but because they actually felt like it, and a cost of living where his British savings and pension turned into something like real wealth. He went back to Birmingham, sat it out for a year, quit his job, and started planning the move. Thailand fell through. Long-term visa rules were getting tighter. Vietnam? Difficult language, more closed culture. The Philippines? English-speaking, friendly people, cheap living, beautiful scenery. The Philippines it was. And specifically, the province. Not Manila, not Cebu, the province. Because the bloggers said, the province, that's where real life is. The logic behind this decision isn't as crazy as it sounds in hindsight. Manila is 20 million people. 12-hour traffic jams, polluted air, and rent that's not much cheaper than Europe in the decent neighborhoods. Cebu is better, but it's still city noise, tourist crowds, and prices that are slowly but steadily climbing. The province is something else entirely. Rent on a house? 10 to 15,000 pesos a month. That's $200 for a whole house with a yard. Market food is almost nothing. People know your face. Quiet. Fresh air. Nature. On YouTube, it looked perfect. Andrew chose Iloilo province, on the island of Panay. Not the most popular expat destination, which was exactly what drew him to it. A real place, not a tourist trap. Through an expat forum, he connected with a local woman online. Her name was Jane, 27, from a small town in the same province, worked at a clothing store. They messaged for 3 months. Then, Andrew bought a ticket. Jane Ramirez was exactly what Andrew had imagined. Quiet, kind, warm. She met him at the airport, holding a handmade sign, his name drawn in colored markers. He later said it was the most touching welcome he'd ever received. They spent the first few days in the city, Iloilo City, the provincial capital. Good city, clean by Philippine standards. Restaurants, malls, decent infrastructure. Andrew thought, perfect. This is where I'll be. But Jane didn't live in the city. She lived in a municipality 40 kilometers from Iloilo City. The name translated to something like the place by the river. Population, around 8,000. One main street. A Sunday market. A handful of small shops. A church the Spanish built in the 17th century. Andrew looked at all of this and thought, this is exactly what I was looking for. That was his first mistake, mistaking a first impression for reality. The first 2 weeks were beautiful. Andrew rented a small house through Jane's connections. Specifically, 3 rooms, a veranda overlooking rice fields, mango trees in the yard. Rent, 12,000 pesos, $210 a month. He woke up to birdsong, drank coffee on the veranda, watched the sunrise turn the fields gold. In the evenings, he and Jane walked along the river. Her family welcomed him warmly, fed him, smiled at him, tried to speak English when they could. This is it, Andrew thought. This is why I came. In week 3, the power started going out. Not emergency outages, scheduled ones. In Iloilo province at that time, cuts ran every day from noon to 6 p.m. 6 hours without power, which meant no fan, which meant 95 degrees in a room that turned into an oven. He went to the store and bought a battery-powered fan. It lasted 2 hours on a charge. He bought a generator. It cost money, drank diesel, and roared like a tractor. The neighbors didn't complain. Half of them had the same thing. That was the first adaptation. He handled it. But it was just the beginning. Let's talk about what life in a Philippine province actually looks like. Not the tourist version, not the Instagram version, the everyday version. Power. We covered that. Outages are the norm. Not everywhere, not every day, but in most remote areas, they happen regularly. Water. Andrew's house had running water, but the pressure dropped every few days. Sometimes there was no water for half a day. He bought a large plastic tank and a pump. Another line item. Internet. Mobile data in the province is unstable. Not because the signal is bad, but because the towers are overloaded. During peak hours, speeds drop to early 2000s levels. For Andrew, who planned to work remotely, this was a disaster. He bought 2 SIM cards from different carriers and switched between them. Sometimes neither worked. Heat. 92 to 97 degrees. Every day. No seasonal variation. Andrew told himself he'd adjust. He didn't. After 2 months, he felt a chronic exhaustion. He was still blaming on acclimatization. Then he realized, this is life in that climate. Your body doesn't fully adapt. It just stops fighting. Food. Local cooking. Spicy. Heavy. Cooked in coconut oil. Andrew loved it for the first 3 weeks. Then his stomach started pushing back. There wasn't a single Western product available in the province. The nearest store with imports? Iloilo City, 40 kilometers away. An hour by transport, when the road was good. The road wasn't always good. By month 1, the house had 3 residents: Andrew, Jane, and Jane's mother. It happened naturally. Her mother came to help out, stayed a few days, then a week, and somehow her things quietly migrated from her own house. Andrew didn't object. Her mother was quiet and kind. She cooked well. 6 weeks in, Jane's younger brother showed up. Roland, 23, unemployed. He came to stay a few days. Andrew was starting to understand what a few days means in the Philippines. Roland didn't leave. Roland started asking for money, small amounts at first, just a loan, for transport, for his phone, for a thing he never fully explained. The money never came back. 2 months in, Jane's cousin arrived with her baby, just temporarily. Her husband went to Manila for work, no one to watch the kid. Then Jane's aunt came for 3 days and stayed 2 weeks. Nobody ever said directly, "You're expected to support them." They didn't have to. Everyone knew he was a foreigner. Everyone knew foreigners earn more. Everyone knew family is family. Jane was caught in the middle. She could see Andrew was uncomfortable, but telling her family to leave, that was impossible in her value system. It would have been nakahiya, shameful. Andrew noticed he was talking to Jane less and less, and complaining to himself more and more. That was a bad sign. So, rolling power outages, unreliable internet, chronic heat, stomach issues, a house full of people he hadn't invited. All of that was survivable. But what came next was the real test. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, now's the time. We cover stories like this every week. And we're just getting to the part Andrew didn't see coming. Andrew was the only foreigner within maybe 30 kilometers. At first, that felt interesting. He was exotic. Kids ran after him on the street, yelling, "Hey, Joe!" the traditional way Filipinos address foreigners, a leftover from the American occupation era. Neighbors peeked over fences. Old men at the corner stores smiled and offered coffee. That was charming for the first few weeks. Then it started to press. He couldn't walk into a shop without becoming the event of the day. Couldn't walk down the street without feeling eyes on him. Couldn't sit alone somewhere because there was nowhere to sit alone. The few places that existed were small, and everyone knew everyone. There was no one to actually talk to. Jane worked part of the day. Her family's English ran to basic phrases. The neighbors, even less. Andrew started spending more time at his laptop. First working, then watching YouTube, then just sitting there staring at the screen because it was the only place that felt familiar. He started calling friends back in Birmingham. With an 8-hour time difference, the calls happened either very early or very late. One time, Gary, an old mate from the soccer crowd, asked, "So how's paradise?" Andrew laughs. But after the call, he sat on the veranda for a long time, staring into the dark. There's a system you need to understand. The barangay. Because without it, the rest of this doesn't make sense. A barangay is the smallest administrative unit in the Philippines, something between a city block and a village. In a big city, a barangay is just a neighborhood. In the province, it's literally your entire world. Each barangay has a captain, an elected position, somewhere between a neighborhood watch coordinator and a local official. There's a barangay council. There's an informal network where everyone knows everything about everyone. For a local resident, that's safety, support, community. For a foreigner, it's constant surveillance with no bad intentions. 3 months in, the barangay captain came to Andrew's house. A polite visit. Official. We're glad you're here. Just want to make sure everything's okay. Then asked to see his visa and his Bureau of Immigration registration. Andrew showed them. Everything was in order. But after that visit, the neighborhood network ran a little hotter. People knew when he left the house, when he came back, who he talked to, what he bought at the market. Not out of malice, just that's how it works. A foreigner in a barangay is an event. People talk. Andrew started feeling like an exhibit in a museum. By month 4, Andrew had a clear understanding. The cheap life in the province is a myth for a foreigner. Not because the prices are high. The prices genuinely are low. But a foreigner in the province doesn't pay local prices. He pays foreigner prices. Nobody set those officially. They just exist. Repairman comes to fix a faucet, quotes 3 times what he'd charge a neighbor. Not theft, just you've got money. You're a foreigner. Taxi driver takes you to the city. Double the price. Market vendor sees a white face. Different price. Andrew bargained at first, then stopped. Not because of the money, but because every negotiation was a small humiliation that ruined the rest of the day. Roland, Jane's brother, had cost Andrew around $300 in loans by month 4. Another similar amount had gone to various family needs. Jane never asked directly, but she always knew when to say, "Mom mentioned Roland has a problem." Andrew started noticing the formula. He'd bring it up with Jane. She'd get upset. He'd feel guilty for upsetting her. And he'd pay. He later called this the most sophisticated trap foreigners fall into, because it's built entirely out of politeness. In month 5, Andrew got seriously sick. Not catastrophically, not malaria, not dengue, just a combination. Intestinal infection, heat exhaustion, chronic sleep deprivation from the heat. 3 days of fever, 2 weeks of weakness. The local clinic in the municipality was small. 1 duty doctor, basic equipment. The doctor's English was poor. Jane translated, but she didn't really know medical terms either. Andrew got an IV drip and antibiotics. It helped. But lying in that small clinic, he had a thought. If something serious happens, I need to get out of here. That's an hour to Iloilo City, and who knows what they've got there. Medical anxiety is its own kind of pressure that builds in the province. You can't call an ambulance and know a team will be there in 10 minutes. You can't just walk in to see a decent doctor without half a day of travel. After the illness, Andrew bought insurance. Good international coverage with medical evacuation included. Cost more than he'd budgeted for. But he slept better after that. In month 6, something happened that Andrew later called the breaking point. One night, he woke up at 3 in the morning to the sound of a neighbor's generator. It was running because the power had gone out again. Unscheduled this time. A substation failure. The room was 100 degrees. The fan wasn't working. Jane was asleep beside him. Roland was asleep on a mattress in the corner. He'd moved in permanently 2 months ago. Jane's mother was on the other side of the wall. Andrew lay on sheets soaked through with sweat and stared at the ceiling. He thought, when was the last time I was alone? Actually alone. Quiet. Cool. No strangers in the house. He couldn't remember. He got up, went out to the veranda, a little cooler at night, sat down in the plastic chair, took out his phone, opened a flight website, just to look. Manila to London, 5 days out. He stared at that page for 20 minutes, then closed his phone and went back to bed. But the next night, he opened it again. Andrew wasn't the kind of person to slip away quietly. He told Jane directly. Not in anger, not after a fight. One evening, when they were alone on the veranda. A rare thing by that point. He said, Jane, I have to go. Not because you're the problem. You're the best part of this whole experience. But I can't live like this. This life, it's not for me. I tried. I genuinely tried. 8 months. But I didn't get happier. I got worse. Jane listened without a word. Then said, I knew. Andrew didn't expect that. You knew what? That you'd leave.
I could see it. You changed every month. Not angry. Just, you were shrinking.
That word, shrinking. Andrew thought about it for a long time afterward. She was right. He hadn't exploded, hadn't argued. He'd just gotten smaller, quieter, more invisible, folding into himself, layer by layer. They parted without anger, which was sad, exactly because there was no anger. Just two people who didn't fit each other, not for personal reasons, but circumstantial ones. Roland moved out the day after Andrew announced he was leaving. That was telling. In Manila's airport, waiting for his flight, Andrew got talking with a man, roughly his age, American, from Oregon. His name was Rick, also flying out. Rick had lived in Davao province, in Mindanao, different island, other end of the country, for 11 months. I lasted longer than you, he said. Same ending, though. They talked for 2 hours while they waited to board. Rick said something important. You know what the problem is with those YouTube channels about living in the province? The guys who are actually there and look happy, they're either lying or they've genuinely rewired. I mean, they've actually made the switch. They don't need fast internet. They don't need personal space. They don't need a healthcare system. They rebuilt themselves. Most of us, we don't rebuild. We think we want a simple life. What we actually want is our own life, just in a warmer climate and cheaper. Those are two very different things. Andrew wrote that down in his phone. Let's talk about what you need to know before making the decision to live in a Philippine province. Number 1. The province is not a slow city. It's a different civilization. In even a modest city, there's infrastructure, hospitals, stable power, decent internet, imported food, other foreigners, transport options. In the province, most of that doesn't exist, or barely exists. This isn't worse or better. It's just different. The question is whether you can live in that difference, not for a week on vacation, but for a year, 5 years, the rest of your life.
Number 2. Cheap living is a relative concept. Yes, rent is cheap, but add a generator, bottled water, regular trips to the city for groceries, medical evacuation insurance, the family tax. The total may not be much cheaper than a small Asian city with actual infrastructure. Number 3. Isolation kills faster than heat and bad internet. We're social animals. We need an environment where we can talk as equals, discuss something, argue about something that matters, make a joke, and have someone actually get it. In a province where you're the only foreigner and you speak a different language, that doesn't exist. You can adapt, but it takes time and a very particular kind of personality. Number 4. Your partner's family is not an option. It's a contract. In the province, family ties are even tighter than in the city. Even less privacy. Even higher expectations. If you live with a local woman in her home territory, you automatically become part of her social ecosystem with all of its obligations. Number 5. Health is the first thing to think about, not the last. International insurance with medical evacuation coverage is not a luxury. It is a basic necessity for any foreigner living in a remote province. Non-negotiable.
Andrew got back to Birmingham in November of that year. Down 26 pounds. The eye twitch cleared up after about 2 months. His stomach took around 6 months to recover. Colleagues asked, "So, how was it?" He said, "Interesting." That was the one word that was simultaneously completely true and completely false. He didn't regret it. Not entirely. He'd seen the sunrise over rice fields. He'd heard a silence that doesn't exist in Birmingham. He'd felt the warmth of a genuine kindness, the kind where people share food because it's right, not because it's expected. And he'd seen the limits of his own adaptability, which is also worth knowing.
He still texts Jane sometimes. She's seeing a local guy now. Andrew is glad for her. He still watches YouTube channels about life in Asia. Only now, he sees what he didn't see before. That behind the beautiful shot on the veranda with the rice field view, there's a generator, bad internet, and 97 degrees in a room with no AC. Sometimes he leaves a comment under those videos. Short. No anger. Just so someone knows. If this story made you think, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And if you're not subscribed yet, now's the time. More stories like this one are coming. Real ones.